I'm showing my screen now, and we should all be able to see it in a matter of seconds. I'm the Fire and Smoke Product Manager for Belimo. I've been at Belimo since 1991, so it's been a rather long career. And I've dealt with a real lot of the fire and smoke retrofit applications. So I'll give you my phone number at the end of the presentation, and anyone with questions about any kind of project, go ahead and let me know. The classic FSAF series of actuators is being discontinued. We're phasing them out during the course of the next 6 months, and we already have in stock and are replacing them with a new actuator, the FSAF A series. So the part numbers are almost identical. Just add an A to the back end of the old part number, and you've got the new actuator. And as you can see, they do look rather alike. The product differences. The new actuator is 180 inch-pounds instead of 133, so that's nice. The temperature rating for the new actuator is 350 degrees instead of 250 degrees, so again, that's nice. Drive time has been reduced to 25 seconds from 75. Drive time isn't as important as spring time in most applications. The new spring time is 15 seconds instead of 20. Not the biggest difference, but valuable in certain cases. We've still got the 3 voltages, 24, 120, and 230, no change there really. The new actuator does not have a manual override, whereas the old one did. It was a feature, and manual override wasn't being used very much. The current draw VA rating is higher on the new actuator. In order to go to the higher temperature, higher torque, faster speed, the motor had to be bigger. Weight essentially the same, and the enclosure is the same. These are NEMA 1. They're not good for outdoor use. You got to put a cover over them. And if you're up in very cold climates, a heater can be used. The price has stayed the same, no changes there. And as you can see, the part numbers on the left side look almost the same, just the addition of a letter A behind the voltage. They are listed to UL 60730 instead of the older actuators, which were UL 873, and all of the new ones are now UL 2043. So we're listed to 60730. That is a UL standard which has replaced UL 873, which was the old electrical standard. UL has grandfathered in the 873, so anything that had an 873 listing is still UL listed. I sit on that committee, and the differences between the two standards are not that different. Almost all of the Belimo actuators are now UL 2043. The exceptions being the large GM and the NEMA 4 enclosure. Now what UL 2043 is it's the plenum standard, and it's the only plenum standard that is allowable now. There are a couple of old plenum standards that are no longer in use. So the National Electrical Code requires that anything in a plenum that's flammable, electrical devices, be tested to UL 2043. The International Mechanical Code also requires it. NEC is every state in the Union. The IMC is about 40, probably 45 of the states. So there are a few places that don't recognize International Mechanical Code yet. They're still using the old uniform. And all of these actuators have already passed UL 555S with the damper manufacturers. Now that standard requires that the damper and actuator be tested as a unit, but it has passed already and is being tested by others. So you'll be seeing these out in the field showing up on large dampers. The actuator will replace the Honeywell MS4120 series, like for like, in the same size dampers. That's where it's being tested. We do have a handout here which repeats this slide. But if you've got a Honeywell that's gone defective, the cross-reference is there. It's pretty straightforward. Same thing with the Siemens GGD series. There aren't too many of these out there. Honeywell is a much stronger company in the fire and smoke. Siemens has a few of these. A lot of these are quite old. The Siemens was being used by the damper manufacturers early on after the latest UL standard came out. However, it drew an awful lot of current and has fallen into disuse. The one place that we've already been using this new A model actuator on has been for pneumatic actuator replacement. Essentially, it's a 6-inch pneumatic torque. That always varies a little bit with linkage and temperature. But you can see some of the larger pneumatic dampers and how they're connected. And this actuator will replace the pneumatic actuator on that as a one-by-one basis. So here you see a large damper and what the actuator might look like on it. The 18 square foot there that we say is a minimum, that's real arbitrary. It does vary a little bit by job to job. We've passed 20 square feet at UL, but we like to derate for retrofit applications. Corrosion, dirt, grime build up. We can see some shifting of ducts at times that cause some extra binding on the side seals. So it's always good to have a little more actuator than you really need. When you do get involved in pneumatic replacement, there's a variety of methods that were used on the older pneumatics for smoke and fire smoke dampers. I do have on our website, and can send it to anybody, a document showing some of the pneumatic methods that were used. Most of us older guys did some pneumatics way back when, so we're familiar and don't feel challenged by it. But with DDC and the younger people coming in, they haven't seen as much pneumatics. The older pipe fitters, though, can always help you. But we do have a document that shows some of the methods used and how to replace the actuators or the controls as needed. Regarding replacements in general, this is UL's statement on it, and I'll just let you read it. The important things in their statement are, one, fire smoke damper is considered an appliance, which is sort of surprising. But you're allowed to repair any appliance. And then they say, well, you can replace the actuator, but it's not covered by UL. It's your local authority having jurisdiction who is in charge of replacement issues. And UL would expect that you'd replace the actuator in accordance with the damper manufacturer's normal field servicing program. And most of them have one, although there's one whose field replacement program amounts to, give them my phone number, and then I take care of those customers, although I'll work with the damper manufacturer to get technical information on some of the real old ones. It is required that all fire and smoke dampers, actually all life safety devices, period, be periodically tested. This chart came out of an ASHRAE article that was published last year that I wrote. But Chapter 7 of the codes covers compartmentation, structural things. So we call the dampers containment dampers, meaning we're just going to contain fire and smoke. These dampers that are installed under Chapter 7 are not connected to the smoke control system or the fire alarm system. They have no controls on them. They have an actuator. Very often they will have the high temperature limit, primary heat responsive device, as UL calls it, and they will be controlled by a smoke detector which is mounted within 5 feet of the damper. So as you pass through a fire smoke barrier, the smoke detector is mounted there, and all it does is close that damper. But those have to be tested, of course, at commissioning, but at 1 year and then every 4 years. So they should be, and testing amounts to close them and open them, making sure the controls work. Hospitals only have to test every 6 years. In most cases here, if any of these dampers fail, they will have sprung closed, and you're going to have a no heat, no cool call. Now, Chapter 9 are your active systems, so that's where your smoke control systems come in. And that's really the International Fire Code that covers the required testing there. If it's a dedicated damper, in other words, it has no other function in the system except smoke control, well, then you've got to test them twice a year. And then if it's non-dedicated, it's part of the regular HVAC system, say the economizer, outdoor air, or the exhaust air. Well, you only have to do it once a year. And actually, those are tested every day if they've been opened and closed. But you got to look at your controls too in your heat-sensitive device. And then any of your panels, your control panels, well, those go through a weekly self-test already. Dampers are not included in the interpretation of most fire marshals and building officials. There are some who would say you got to test your dampers too and look at them. That's rare, but I have seen it. Now, if it's a non-dedicated part of the HVAC system for some reason, then no testing is required. There's very few of those. But the point for any of this testing is you will almost always find some defective actuators. They won't close back up, or they won't reopen. So testing is where the contractor is going to find defectives and get business out of that. The codes don't cover repair issues very well. They will say that all life safety devices must be in operating order. That's a given. If your fire alarm system were to go down, you should probably have a fire watch. You need to take care of those right away. The two standards that do repair work, and both of them are referenced by almost all codes, New York City being the only exception I know, are NFPA 80 and NFPA 105. So 80 covers fire dampers and doors, 105 covers smoke. Both of them say that you should repair anything. One of them says immediately, the other one says as soon as possible. It doesn't say you may, it says you must keep these things in repair. Now and then we get somebody who's a little bit afraid to replace the actuator in a fire smoke damper. Well, you're required by code to replace that and fix it. And you'll find working with fire marshals is just delightful. They're happy you're fixing things. They're not going to give you any trouble about this. So now and then, if there's any fear, I'm happy to call a fire marshal or building official and find out what they might want in addition to anything covered by NFPA 80 or 105. But essentially, those two will say, check the damper, go through a little list of making sure it works right. After you replace the actuator, test it. If you have touched any fire alarm wiring, which is not normally connected to a fire or smoke damper, then you must retest that fire alarm or smoke control system to make sure that it's still functional. The standards for new construction at the factory are the UL 555 rules. So the smoke damper rules there, damper reps would tend to look to UL for their rules, but in all truth, it's 80 and 105 that are referenced by the codes, and that's where you get your repair rules. The BLEMO product range covers everything. So we've had the FSNF and FSLF around since early 2000s. The new FSAFA is much larger dampers. The mass market is the FSTF. That's about 50% of the dampers are less than 2 square feet. So you'll see the damper manufacturers now providing this FSTF. It's the only one we have that's got an entire plastic case. So that's where this UL 2043 really matters. You've got a flammable device in a plenum, and about half of fire smoke dampers are mounted in a plenum. So we do have the low smoke rating type plastics. We also have the modulating actuators. We are discontinuing the older modulating and balancing actuator later this year and replacing it with the new FSAFB, which is again higher torque, although it's the same 250-degree temperature, which is code temperature. But we can cover all the different applications you bump into, and where you see pneumatic modulating actuators, we do have a high torque one there that will replace them. So I believe Michaela will take over again now. She probably fell asleep. We have that problem with her.
Not at all, Larry. I couldn't find the audio button. Well, thank you so much for that great presentation. As I said, we are going to open the floor for some questions. So if you are one of those individuals who wants to type in a question, you have that function in the question box. Just a friendly reminder that there is one handout in the handout section that you can download. And so I will be reading the questions aloud, and Larry will answer them, hopefully as best as possible. So are you ready, Larry?
Yes.
Okay. Will the new BLEMO valves also meet the new UL for plenum rating?
I haven't checked every new valve actuator. The NV series, yes, and where any of our LM, NM type of actuators are on a valve, yes, they meet it. It's a good question. I need to check on one actuator. So Michaela, if you would shoot me that email address of that person if we have it.
You got it.
I will double check on that.
Okay.
We probably made it. We're very conscious of the standard.
All right, next question. How do you tell the age of a damper motor? Is it in the serial number?
On the BLEMOs, there's a date code. On Honeywell and Siemens are good about date codes. When you get to these old multi-products and ECM and CBs, it gets a little bit shaky. They didn't all have date codes, and some of them are so old with so much grime and dirt and wear and the wind blowing across them that the labels have been blown off. So I can't give you a strict answer about that. Usually I go to project drawings and can take a look and see about how old the building was, and you can tell. but anyone can shoot me pictures of, and people do it every day, pictures of a damper and actuator, and I can usually tell you any of the replacement issues that matter. Age per se is rarely an issue because they aren't functioning and need to be replaced.
Okay.
And as a remark for anyone sending me pictures, we're not usually replacing just the actuator. When I look at these, we're very often checking the spring method, and we're sometimes recontrolling, taking off old linkage and so forth, just to drop on and direct couple the actuator. You can get me a picture of the actuator, but pull back and get a picture of the damper. And if you can, there's usually an access door. Stick your cell phone in there and get a few pictures of the damper blades and any mechanisms in there. We do have some of these negator spring dampers and a lot of shaft springs in there. And it's good for me to take a quick look at it and make sure that everything is going well. Once you do a few projects, you get experienced at it, and it starts to become easy. But those first few of them can be sort of confusing while you're investigating what they were doing, because some of the old methods were weird.
Okay. Next question. Does UL allow for dual use of a fire smoke damper? In other words, in a high-rise, can you use the fire smoke damper on each floor as an isolation damper for HVAC control?
Yes.
Simple as that, yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Next question. What type of heater would be used in cold applications? Does Belimo have a part for that?
ZG, Z-Gadget, -HTR. And I'm redoing all of the accessories on our website and documentation now, and I'm not too I know that I have that as an active part. I don't know if it's on the web, but I will check today and make sure we're getting it on there. I'll put it on the top of the list since somebody asked about it.
Okay. How do you know what is covered under a specific manufacturer's field actuator replacement procedure? Specifically, is your actuator approved for the use on that manufacturer's damper and model type?
It all depends, of course, on whether you look to UL or you look to your local authority having jurisdiction. We're UL listed with every damper manufacturer with at least several actuators, if not all of them. All of your big manufacturers, we're listed with all our actuators. You've got a few smaller regional companies who haven't listed everything. The UL doesn't recognize any damper that was tested under the old standard. So in 2002, they went to all new standards. But dampers older than that, they've thrown away the procedures. So there are no actuators even listed for those dampers anymore. They will, if somebody wanted them to, go send a field rep out to a building to look at a replacement, and they won't give you a label, but they will write you a letter saying that the damper has been repaired and replaced in accordance with the newest standard. They're very careful about that. We do many thousands of replacements every year. I have only had to do that once. The local authority having jurisdiction, we submit to them our instructions, and that has satisfied 99% of the projects we've been involved in. My goal is, of course, make sure we do it right. This is a life safety device. None of us want any kind of liability or problems. We test them and we make sure it's all right. There are some unwritten rules which seem to be common sense, but nowhere are they in the codes. If you're replacing an old fire smoke actuator, you must use one that has passed the new UL555S. It's an unwritten rule, though. And since there is no old procedure and it is a different damper, how you can exactly say that it's going to work, it becomes a matter of common sense and engineering judgment, but it's not in any of the rule books. I hope that answers that sufficiently. I don't mean to be mealy-mouthed. We have had no problems with that issue.
Okay, next question. Do you offer a NEMA 3R enclosure?
We have those enclosures, and they can be used with the fire smoke actuators.
Okay.
Yes.
Next couple of questions. Any issue with replacing the old valve motor with a new one that is not listed with the fire damper by the damper manufacturer?
No, I've never had a problem. But what we would do, in what I've done in certain cases, is they wanted to use, say, an FSTF little actuator, and I've said no, you can't do it. Now, I'm not the authority, I'm not the police. However, it's an accepted practice that you ought to use one of the actuators that was listed with that damper manufacturer. The FSNF is listed with everybody. FSLF with all except one. So we would tend towards those two actuators rather than the real little one.
Okay, last and final question before we conclude this webinar. Any plans for a 350 version of the FSTF?
No.
No.
It wouldn't be cost effective. Just go to an FSLF. If you're doing 1,000 of them on a project, well, that price is going to matter. If you're doing, just a few replacements, well, the extra $10 is nothing. But I'd go to an FSLF right away for 350-degree operation.
All right. Well, once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you do have any additional questions or comments, please feel free to email us at marketing@us.belimo.com. And Larry has one more slide for you to get directly in contact with him for assistance.
I should have put my email address there, too. It is on our website and all the documents, but it's simply larry.felker@us.belimo.com. Same pattern for all of our people, first name dot last name. And then there's my cell number if anyone needs to call me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Larry, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Just want to friendly remind you that there is another webinar coming up on March 30th, and that's going to be on why economizing makes sense. So if you are interested in that, we have sent out some email signups. Feel free to register, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Everyone, have a great day.